Okay, are the AI glasses challengers that are out there coming after Meta something or nothing to worry about for Meta? Okay, today we're going to be looking at the small number of startups that are working on AI glasses that, record and show info based on your context by calling large language models and using AI. And is this something for Meta to be worried about or not really, and absolutely nothing to be worried about? Are these sorts of startups and new entrants going to beat Meta to the punch, potentially ruin the market and dampen people's enthusiasm about this whole product category of wearables that you put on your face, like glasses, and are able to kind of see more and do more from it? Basically, should Meta investors sweat this or not? And so to figure this out, we're going to take a look at some of the historical comps and talk through what we think it really takes for Meta to win here. So one of the comps I want to touch on first was another very different product, but gained a lot of popularity very quickly and then literally flamed out, and that's hoverboards. And I think that there's something pretty instructive to learn from this. So you might remember kind of seeing a lot of different videos riding of people riding around on hoverboards. Maybe you tried one yourself. And I think one of the big takeaways from the hoverboards craze was that there wasn't really a recognizable brand that went with the hoverboards. I think generally speaking, they were coming from a variety of different Chinese factories, places in Shenzhen where these were actually being manufactured. And with that, there was never really a perception for the customer of like a brand or somebody kind of standing behind the product for it that was really easy to see. And so, inevitably, when one of the manufacturers, wasn't quite up on the quality that they should have been, and there was a problem and fires, all of a sudden there was no one to kind of point to and say, hey, it was this brand that screwed it up and my brand is better. See, mine doesn't have these sorts of problems. They were all kind of mashed together in the consumer's mind. And because it was somewhat unbranded, it literally had one flame out kind of take everybody out with it. And those blowups kind of took everyone down, even presumably the good manufacturers. And I think one of the takeaways here is like when we look at the wearables space and AI glasses, given Meta's positioning and kind of the strength of their brand, I think they're totally fine here, right? They can ride out whether that's some of the inevitable, let's say, like privacy concerns around wearables or them being uncomfortable or otherwise. If smaller startups push these out and don't have success with it, I think Meta already has their kind of established brand. And obviously, the partnership with Ray-Ban and Luxottica, they're thinking a lot more about kind of the branding to protect themselves from maybe other startups really pushing in and being aggressive, maybe not having the product fully baked and consumers kind of souring, or early adopters that are consumers souring on the idea. So I think Meta's in a pretty good spot there, and well established. So smart how they've been thinking about it. The second thing to think about historically here, super relevant, is Google Glass, like going back to the 2013 or thereabouts time. And I think my perception of this really was like it wasn't so much that the product was flawed with Google Glass. In fact, I think there was some life cycle of folks using it for different enterprise applications, even or otherwise. It really came down to kind of the branding and positioning more so than the product. I mean, I think we all remember like the glass holes concept of like who those people were, why they were wearing it, or otherwise, and really kind of attributing this to more of like a branding and marketing and positioning story for Google Glass for why it didn't take off. And ultimately probably set behind the kind of glasses wearables market by at least 8 years or so before Snap and Meta started kind of moving in again to this sort of space and with this sort of positioning. And I think Meta seems to be like hyper aware of it. If really kind of thinking about like, well, what would go wrong here? Like, is there some sort of problem for us and how we're positioning it? And I think because Google Glass was like so closely linked to the history in this space, seems like they're able to kind of take some of those lessons and have been kind of leaning into avoiding that sort of death with it. So I think, Meta has obviously had success here so far in a small scale. So I think they've sold 2 million of their like Raybound partnered units in the past 2 years. And looks like they're trying to ramp that up to do $10 million of, sorry, 10 million units that is sold in 2026. So going into next year, thinking about ramping that up quite a bit. It's about like a 10x growth in annual number of units that they hope to move. So looking to kind of scale that up. I think as I look at it, there's a few reasons why things might not work out for Meta here, and it seems like they're trying to figure out how to address it. First and foremost, I think is the privacy issue. Meta, while having a obviously extremely well-known brand, does have issues around kind of privacy and how people are going to be thinking about having their data used. They might be able, though, to kind of turn what could be perceived as a weakness into more of a strength when, in comparison to, let's say, a lot of other players in the space, startups getting out of the gates or otherwise, they do have that kind of like established brand of knowing as a consumer, you know that you will probably kind of understand what is going to happen to your data to some degree. You know that there's going to be scrutiny, let's say on Meta, if they do things that are particularly untoward or underhanded for it. Like there's high visibility there. It's not a small startup in that regard, but obviously that's kind of a bigger concern, for Meta here, and what might limit this to kind of more of an early adopter segment that is willing to kind of totally blow past some of the privacy issues or potential concerns until we get to kind of like the late majority section of the population here. Second biggest risk here, I think, is actually like just customer need. Do people want this type of product, right? And is it destined to be a niche product where they're selling a couple million units a year, which for a company like Meta is like absolutely a total nothing to them in terms of revenue and kind of like driving the business forward. And that's is where actually I think they benefit quite a lot from more startup experimentation. Like it's almost like they'd rather see more competition, more venture-backed startups going after this space, maybe in some creative ways. I think that might help them to validate some of the pockets of consumer need that were there rather than be actual competitors to them. On the other hand, I think, Facebook and Meta have such potential feedback coming back from users. They really know and understand what a lot of people are thinking, probably before they're able to kind of articulate that, just given a lot of the data that they have on what consumers respond to, where their interests, et cetera. But at the same time, like seeing other people fail and seeing other aspects of this work out, or there being interest or understanding those aspects, it's like free information that they can just collect here from a bunch of creative startups going out, being motivated, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So I think they're in a position to just benefit totally from that. And then lastly, like a risk to them is just speed, right? Somebody moves faster and is able to move faster and iterate through that. I'm not seeing that as much of a risk given how Meta seems to move on these things and how they're kind of setting up some of these partnerships, whether it's the Ray-Ban and Luxottica, to be able to move ahead with things that kind of continue apace. I think that they're on track to launch something as well before the Christmas season, so that's smart. They kind of get into the gift buying aspect for folks and hopefully pick up some of the kind of the early adopters there overall. So I think looking at this pretty completely, I think this stuff is like nothing at all for Meta to worry about. I think that the biggest risk to them is just like putting out a product that people really like and are interested in and excited enough to try with it, and getting kind of the right branding and presentation and packaging for it. This feels like it's mostly within Meta's control of putting out a great product and positioning it rather than having to really think too much about some of the external factors. And I think we're reading some of the tea leaves coming out of OpenAI when you think about the acquisition of Johnny Ives' studio and what sort of hardware product they might be working on initially. It doesn't sound like that's in the glasses space. So again, that kind of changes a little bit of the calculus as well for Meta thinking about kind of where, unless there's some huge sleight of hand and misdirection going on there, that gives Meta more of a clear lane to develop in and push in, especially with Apple having already kind of set down their marker with Vision Pro and what that looks like, and feeling like fundamentally different in terms of a use case and just mental perception that consumers would have over Vision Pro in comparison to what Meta is putting forward with glasses. And I'm excited too. On another episode, I think we'll tackle whether this whole market is even worth winning and whether it's a good investment for Meta. But just in terms of like actually winning in this space, it seems like Meta is really well positioned for that. So if you agree or you disagree, comment down below. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about this. And of course, subscribe to get more analysis and more business with Arnold.